everybody. It's Brett and Bjorn, my awesome co-host. And we are Bev Live. So here we are with our weekly live stream. And Bjorn had a really cool idea for today's live stream since it's such a special day for so many of us. So why don't you tell them about your idea, Bjorn?
Well, it is Veterans Day, so happy Veterans Day, everybody.
Yes, food,
Very nice, very nice,
Woo!
very nice. Nice touch. Well, Brett is a veteran, so
Yes.
we thought we'd make it, not just about wine. We make it about Veterans Day and maybe some wine, as we can see here. Brett. So what did you do? What makes you a veteran?
Yeah, so I was in the Army. I joined right out of college, actually, to help figure my life out a little bit. And I was an intelligence analyst, and I did that for my term in. So about 4.5, 5 years I was in, and I got out, and I did that for a little bit as a contractor. And then that's when I decided I want to go the tech route because everything was so dependent on technology, even in the everything you could think of was automated almost to a certain point in the military. So I figured I want to be on the other side of that. And that's what I did. I went back to school, and that's how I am now a software engineer and CTO of BevLive many years later.
Very cool. So
yes.
Is there any so were you exposed to anyone while you were working? Or I mean, how does that work?
Yep. So I joined. Exactly. I joined, that's kind of the catch, right? You get all these good benefits. That's what they tell you when you go in, and you're like, okay, cool. I could get college paid for. I could get, home mortgage. I could do all these cool things through the VA and my benefits. What they don't tell you though, especially when I joined, it was the height of the Afghan and Iraq war. So when I went to basic training, no kidding, the day that I got in there, I remember all the drill sergeants going around, and they'd say, well, every single one of you is going to be deployed in a few months the minute you get to your duty station.
Wow.
And you're like, sure, yeah, I'm sure I'll be deployed eventually, but you don't really know when. The minute I got to my first duty station, there was already talk, and they're like, yeah. So I think I got there. It had been about September, close to winter. And then they were, we're talking about deploying, and I think it was May, right? And so Christmas comes up, and the Army, and the Army is a big organization, so the units, they're kind of different depending on where you're stationed. But I was in a big combat unit. And so at the end, they do this thing called block leave and basically make everybody go home for Christmas. And it's 2 weeks, just everything's shut down. But you don't want to stay around because then you're on all these extra duties that you don't want to do during your holidays. So it behooves you to take that leave when they give it to you. And right before we signed out for leave, I remember them gathering us around formation, telling us the speech, and said, well, guess what? We're deploying in February now. So pack your stuff, because the minute you come back, we had to go Fort Polk, Louisiana, where we trained for about a month there, pre-deployment training. Got back, kissed your wife and child goodbye, and see you later. And then that was my first time to Afghanistan. I was gone for a whole year.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite a story there. So when you go to when you go to places like Afghanistan, I know there's what do they call them, like Class 6 stores and things like that. But in some areas, I guess it's also not allowed to drink any alcohol, depending on where you go.
Exactly. So that's the interesting part about this. And a lot of people would say, and I thought about this too, knowing that we were going to do the veteran topic for our wine Bev Live cast here, live stream. So I was thinking, what could I say about wine that links to my military career? And it's really hard to do that because, like you said, when you're stationed in the States, they got the Class 6, which is the liquor stores that you don't pay taxes. It's like a duty free, but you don't have to go to a foreign country and come to the airport to get it. So it's pretty cool, and you can find some really good deals. And where I was stationed in upstate New York, they could get stuff, we can't get where we live, for instance, right, Bjorn? So there was some really cool stuff you could get for cheap. But when you go to Afghanistan, for instance, it's an Islamic country. So they're run by religious law, Sharia law. And they at the time, they did not allow alcohol in the country. It was forbidden. It's illegal. It's not allowed in the Quran. So they take it literally too. When you got to think, I was there under Taliban rule. So this is not Dubai. This is not the modern Saudi Arabia or something. I mean, it's pretty strict rules. So no alcohol allowed. Not to say, and where I was, you wanted to drink anyway because it was a war zone, right? So you had to be alert at all times and ready for anything. But you get out of that area, you get to some of the bigger bases where you have to fly in to go into the country. There certain other militaries, I won't name names of foreign countries, Germany, they don't care about those rules, and they would just bring in their own supply. And so it was interesting to see how every country dealt with that dilemma. And
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was really cool. But there was probably the most interesting thing I saw while I was on that deployment was on the way over. We stopped in Kyrgyzstan, and I've heard of the country, but that's about it. I never thought what it would be like. And I stayed there for about a week before we flew off to Afghanistan. And they were not in that bubble. So they had wine tastings, I think, every Wednesday night at what they call the MWR. So it's a building where you go typically watch TV. You can call home. It stands for, I think, morale, welfare, and recreation is what it means. And so when you're overseas, that's like the only thing to do. So they would do wine tastings there every Wednesday night.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So did you get into wine at all during that time, or was
no? That's what's interesting.
After that, you got really into wine.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is I did not. I actually did not really drink before I joined the military. I hate to say that. But I started drinking beer. That's when I was in my mid-20s at that time. So, I didn't really start drinking beer until I was about 23. And that was like Coors Light and light stuff. And then I got into whiskeys toward the end of my career there. But then wine, I didn't. I would drink it if I was offered, but I didn't seek it out. And that was just because I did not know enough about it. Even though my parents, they're big wine people, like I've mentioned on a previous live stream. I just never looked into it. And then it wasn't until I got out of the military and I was starting to go home, see my family more often, just live closer, because I was stationed in New York. They live in Georgia. So that was quite like a 20-something hour drive. That wasn't happening very often. So every time I would go see them, that's when the wine started coming up. And we're big food people as well. So wine is part of that culture. And that's how I got into it, was just through my love of food. And that's how wine came about.
Cool. So was there, you may not remember this, some people do, some people don't. Was there like a moment like when you tasted something where you go like, well, this is something I really like? Or
it is. And it was not actually wine, it was champagne. So for a wedding gift, when me and my wife, Ashley, I have to say my wife Bjoern's like, well, who are you talking about? Because we know each other personally. But so when we got married, it was my mother actually, she gave us a gift of a Dom Perignon. It was a vintage, nice. I forget what year, but it was pretty old. And it was I won't say it was like a rosé type of flavored champagne. So I was like, I'm probably not going to like that. And man, when I drank that, I was like, no wonder people pay a couple $100 a bottle. Nice. And it was perfect. So that was probably the first time like I was blown away by a bottle. And then the second time it happened was in college. Actually, I was in Greece. I was studying abroad, doing a semester over there, and wine was readily available. It was super cheap. I remember going into a convenience store and I was at the counter paying, giving them my euros, and here you go. And I was like, I see wine on your menu, but where is it? I didn't see it on a bottle on the shelf somewhere. And the guy looks at me like, and he goes behind him. There's a big curtain, so he pulls it out of the way, and it's a big vat of wine. So he goes up there and just pours it from the spout, and here you go. And I was in a 2-liter like water bottle, and just recycles it and gives it to you. And I was like, okay. And it was like, for that big bottle, I swear, Bjoern, it was like €3 maybe.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way this is going to be good, right? There's no way. It was really, really good, So I was like, it was equivalent to what we would pay to, $10 to $15 a bottle here in the States, I'd say. And it was fantastic.
Well, I think one thing that people also don't know is the cost of the bottle, the cost of the label, the cost of shipping and everything else. So it's, that it all adds up. And if you, get it like a reefer, kind of like, growlers with beer, same thing, you do not have that cost. You just pay for the juice itself. You just pay for the wine itself.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't know all that went into the bottle and the marketing until you told me that, and how much markup there could be potentially. Not that every company does that. Let's be very clear about that immediately. But yeah, it blew me away. And I was thinking, that's when I started thinking, what happens if I buy $100 bottle of wine versus a $40 bottle of wine? What's the difference? And I don't really know, but what I can tell you is I've had fantastic bottles of wine at every price point. And
I think that's
especially,
I think coming turning the corner to Bev Life here, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's like you talk about Dom Perignon, or similar champagnes, and there are parts of the world that make very impressive sparkling wines, but they may not be labeled as champagnes because they're from a different area and legally cannot do that. But there's some very impressive products there for for $20 or something that it may not be Dom Perignon, but are very, very enjoyable.
It is, and I'll say it again and again. You don't have to pay big money for, big flavor that you can impress people with too. Because and I thought about this too, how many times do you host or people host a dinner? They're nervous. Maybe it's close family, relatives, whatever. They bring out the bottle of wine, let you try it. But I've done it, and I can't think of a single time I've been asked how much that bottle cost, right? So I think people have the false impression that if I don't spend enough, then I'm going to look cheap. But what I would like to tell people is that no one's going to know, and you can find really great bottles for that $10, $15 price point. I really believe it. Not saying there's not a time for that $50 to $100 to $200 bottle. Every wine's got a purpose. And I'm sure there's collectors out there that have, bottles that cost well more than that. And that's great. But don't get hung up on the price. Get hung up. If you're going to get hung up, to me, it's on the style. Who's your audience that will be drinking it? And how are you going to present it? And just enjoy it.
So, question of the day for everybody watching: what is a time when you brought over a bottle that was less than $20 and really blew people away? Get in contact with us. Use the contact form on Bev Live and let us know. And we may talk about it in our next show. It's going to be a new segment for us that. We're going to be starting in some of these shows. We're going to do some questions, and we want all of you to kind of interact and let be kind of part of these discussions.
Exactly, and I think we talked a little bit about it last week, Bjoern, that our new kind of marketplace model. I won't say the new model, but it's an addition to the model of the marketplace we already have, where we'll be adding new wineries and that will have the potential to do whatever they like, really, and use Bev Live as a platform and the way that it benefits them the most. So I hope people write in. If you're watching now, please write in to us and tell us what that bottle was that blew you away for that price point. Because we're not so worried. It's great. Yeah, please look below while you're watching, down below, and buy. But it's more than that, right, Bjoern? It's about community. So tell us about a wine that blew you away. If it's not on our platform, that's okay too, because maybe they would like to be on Bev Live. We don't know. Right now it's mostly our boutique wineries that we are friendly with and who have really cool backstories. So I'd love to, future note here, Bjoern, do a segment on that too, about some of the how far these winery stories really go. But yeah, there's so many segments, so many exciting. And now that, so, you've probably watched our other streams and you see this one now too, and you're like, wow, this one's a different format. What's going on? So we're using a different software tonight to try the remote broadcast. And how cool would it be, Bjoern, if we got a whole bunch of stories and we read through one and we found one that blew us away and we had that person on as a guest?
Well, there you go. Be on the show. I think that's a fantastic idea. I love it. We're basically making up the ideas, the future streams as we go here. So I think that's fantastic. I love it. Brett, so can we have several people on at the same time, or is it limited to
I think we can. We could have several. I want to say up to 10, but I want to check on that since this is a new venture for us. But yeah, that's absolutely. And as you saw when I invited you on, it's super easy. So yeah, we could have a whole panel discussion on here.
I love it. We can get wineries involved. We can, talk about Pinot Noir one day. We can talk about Cabernet Sauvignon another. I absolutely love it. And it was easy. It was like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you remember the old they used to do this on the radio? Sometimes they might still do it, but I want to. the DJs, they would call, they would have someone call in and say, tell us about like the worst date you ever had or something like that. So the person would call in, before they got on the show, they were talking, but what they didn't know is while they were talking to that radio DJ, they would invite them on to come on the following week to the show to tell them about this worst date ever. And then they would come on the next week and they were telling the story. But what they didn't know is in that week, the radio station went and they found that person that they were telling the story about, and they listened to the whole thing. And then at the end of it, they say, oh, yeah, by the way, we've got so-and-so on the line and they heard everything you said. So do you want to defend yourself? But what if we did like a more positive spin on that, right? And we had someone telling us that $20 bottle that blew them away story. And then we had the winery, that presented it right there. And then they're like, oh, yeah, thank you. Because
I think that's great.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know it's tough for these wineries sometimes because anytime you make a product for the public, you put it out there, you hope it does well, but sometimes you never hear feedback, even if, the revenue is obviously feedback, but it helps to feel like you're part of that person's life story. When they tell you that they had a first date with somebody, bought this bottle for $20 and now they're married to that person and they tell everyone the same story, at family gatherings.
Yeah, let's get people together. How cool would that be if you have had this story for the last 20 years and we can connect you with the wineries? Our connections within the wine industry are pretty deep. So you'd be surprised, who we can get you in contact with. So let's do it. Get in contact with us. Send us an email, and we'll do the best we can to get you on the show and get in contact with some of these wineries. And if not, you can still chat with us and talk about it. Yeah.
So yeah, right. Hey, we're not opposed to going and meeting them if we don't know them, right?
There you go. So anything else, Brett? Let's see. It's Veterans Day, so we talked about Thanksgiving being just around the corner. So, next week we got to make sure we do, and I mentioned this last time we talked, a show about wines that go well with Thanksgiving. I know that many of you are going to have people over, and in many places, there will be wine. So, we'll definitely plan to have a show next week about wines that go well with Thanksgiving or the holidays in general.
Yeah. A lot of those dishes are similar through Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So I could almost see pairing different wines with each course of the meal, depending on what you were eating, so and there's always wine and no one will turn it down. But yeah, I think that'll be a fun, I know I have family coming in for Thanksgiving and I was talking to you about that actually. Bjoern, what do I do? Can you come over and do a tasting? Cause I'm freaking out.
I don't think you're freaking out, Brett. Yeah, I'll come over.
We need an excuse. Yeah,
exactly.
So I know holidays are coming. They're busy. And isn't this too, Bjoern? This is the time the wineries do their harvest.
Yeah, most of them are pretty much done with harvest by now. But,
okay, they just finished. Awesome.
But I think that's what Thanksgiving, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's a harvest festival, right? It's to celebrate the harvest and well, I guess here in the US, it's celebrated most people don't know it's celebrated one way or the other all over the world, and here the history is a little bit different, but in many ways it's harvest festival. And so that's that's wine. It's an agricultural product, and it's not and in many ways, and in most parts of the world, most of these winery owners are farmers. They're not wealthy, rich people, and there's nothing wrong with that, with being wealthy and rich. But in most parts of the world, they are farmers, and that's I bet you the people that made the wine that you had in on your deployment, was probably from, one of those farmers, and they made a good product at a fair price, and it goes for any agricultural product.
That's it. Yeah, I think that's a great place to put a pin in, and I don't think we can follow that message anymore. So thank you for tuning in, and I'm Brett.
And I'm Bjoern.
And we're Bev Live. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.